Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Glad to see you all here. Kind of want to give you a quick recap of where we're at. So last week we finished a series called Not Ashamed. This week we are starting a brand new series. It's all about Moses' obedience. So during this time, we are going to be walking through the book of Exodus. We're going to be diving into Moses' obedience, even when he didn't want to obey God. So we're going to dive in what that looks like, how he did it, the battles he struggled with, and what the end result ended up being like. So before we really get started and diving into scripture here, how many of you feel you know the story of Moses and the Israelites? Some of you might know that Moses parted the Red Sea. Some of you might know that they had a lot of slaves that he was trying to rescue out. But for the next few weeks, we are going to be taking a deeper dive into Moses' journey all the way through the book of Exodus. Now, before I really get started here, how many of you have felt God call you to do something, whether it was small, whether it was large, but you didn't obey? It could have been because you were scared. It could have been because you didn't feel like you were the right person for that opportunity of what he was trying to have you do. You could have been too embarrassed. As we dive into the story with Moses and the Israelites, I want you to realize that you are not alone in feeling that way. Questioning God and obeying God are two different things. And that's going to be the lesson that we're talking about today. So before we get started, I want to open this up in some prayer. So Father, we come before you today. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to learn your word, learn from the examples you have given us. And I pray that we open our ears and open our hearts to allow us to really understand what you were trying to teach us in this story of Moses and the Israelites. I pray that you allow us to stay calm in this time as we take a deep dive into the book of Exodus, Father. In your name, Lord, amen. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. Do any of you even know how the story of Moses began? Because it didn't begin right in the beginning of Exodus. It kind of started about 400 years prior. So I want to give you a quick lesson, kind of catch you up on where we were compared to where we're going to be starting at right now. So about 400 years prior, a man named Jacob was renamed by God to Israel. So Israel had 12 sons. That became the 12 tribes of Israel. So Israel were the descendants of Jacob. So that's how Israel got started. That's where the 12 tribes of Israel came from. Now, fast forward 400 years, the Israelites, which are Jacob's descendants, are now staying in Egypt. And there was a huge difference between the Israelites and the Egyptians. So I want you to understand that for a moment. So the Israelites, they were wanderers. They would travel from nation to nation. They didn't really have a home base, a home country, while the Egyptians were deeply rooted in their culture and where they were from. The Israelites were also mostly shepherds, while the Egyptians were builders. Here's a big thing. The Egyptians served many gods. The Israelites worshiped one God named Yahweh. Now, if we combine all those facts with the fact that the Israelites have been living in the land of Egypt and the Israelites were growing at an extremely fast pace, Pharaoh decided to enslave the Israelites. I want to put in perspective how fast and how big the Israelites grew. So in a matter of 400 years, they started with about 70 people. and ended up between 2 to 3 million people within a matter of 400 years. So because of that, well, we'll get to that. Let's read the scripture first of what it says. So we're going to turn to Exodus 1, 11 through 14. So second book of the Bible, Exodus 1, 11 through 14. And it says, so the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build cities of Pithom and Ramesses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and brick and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. The Pharaoh was getting scared. He was getting scared because of how fast and how many people the Israelites had. He was worried that the people of Israel would outnumber his own people, his own army, and would want to revolt against him. Can you imagine that? The slaves were getting to a point where they were going to outnumber his own people. So the more he tried, and the more he tried to force them to do hard labor, more he forced them into backbreaking work, he thought it was going to cause them to slow down the baby making. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. They just kept producing and producing more babies. It didn't matter how much labor got put on them, how hard the slave drivers were on them, they just kept growing. So the Pharaoh got nervous. He's like, what am I going to do? So he came up with a way to try to slow down the expansion. Well, in verse 16, so still chapter 1, verse 16, it says, Pharaoh told the midwives that if the slaves, or the Israelites, had a boy, kill the baby. But if it was a girl, let it live. He put in an order that no baby boys were allowed to be born. And if they were, for the midwives to kill them. Some of you may not fully understand what a midwife is. For those who don't know, a Hebrew midwife helped the women give birth and cared for the mothers until they were strong enough to care for their own babies. So the midwives tried everything they could to disobey the Pharaoh, because originally it was their job to take care of the mom and the baby. That was their job. But yet the Pharaoh's telling them, oh, now you need to also kill the firstborn son. Can you imagine how hard that would be? But yet that's why the midwives tried to disobey. But it was Pharaoh's orders. If they wasn't done, there was consequences for not getting it done. During this time, when Pharaoh had put out this order for the newborn boys to be killed, is when Moses was born. So to avoid Moses being killed, Moses' mother put him in a basket and put him in the river. For some of you, be like, that's horrible. Why would you do that? She was trying to keep him from being killed. So she was hoping someone would find him. And who found him? The only one person that would have the heart to do it and the ability to be able to save him, the Pharaoh's daughter. She felt bad for the baby when she saw him crying. Not only did she feel bad, but she wanted to raise the baby herself now. But she had her servants go look for the baby's mother so that she could nurse him until he was at the age so she can start raising him. So let me ask you, if you were in that situation and you saw a baby on the river floating, crying, what would you have done? I'm sure most of us would have stopped in that moment, looked around, been like, oh my God, there's a baby. Whose is it? Let me take care of it. But then you got to remember the time they were in. They were supposed to be putting those baby boys to sleep. They were not supposed to be keeping them. So you'd be directly disobeying the Pharaoh if you kept that baby. But who was the one person that would not have been able, or who was the one person that could have disobeyed Pharaoh? Pharaoh's daughter herself. So I want to fast forward just for a little bit here. So now that the Pharaoh's daughter decided to raise Moses, we're going to fast forward about 40 years. So at this point, Moses has grown up. He is an adult. Mind you, he knows he is different than the Egyptians. He knows he is part of the people of the Israelites. So one day he wants to go out and be around his people, the Israelites, for a little while. Well, he comes across and sees a slave driver beating one of his fellow Israelites. In that moment, Moses was so compelled to protect him that he stopped the slave driver, but he also murdered him as he did it. In that moment, he felt shame. He was scared. He went and hid the body, thinking that he could keep it a secret. But as it turned out, someone did see him. The next day, he saw two Israelites fighting. All he wanted to do was break up the fight and understand why they were fighting each other. So if we turn to Exodus 2:14, it tells us what happens in that moment. So Exodus 2:14 says, the man replied, who appointed you to be our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Then Moses was afraid, thinking, everyone knows what I did. Stop there for just a second and think about that. Moses was afraid because of what he had just done. He tried covering it up so no one would find out what he did. Sometimes we mistakenly think we can get away with doing something wrong if no one else sees or no one else catches us. Sooner or later, however, doing wrong, especially continuously doing sin, living in sin, will catch up to you. And eventually you'll have to face God and his evaluation for your actions. Now, as for Moses, I want to put this in perspective for you. Moses was raised in the palace. He was not raised with the rest of his people, but yet he felt loyal to them. He knew he was one of them. Moses knew the Pharaoh would be mad at him and would want to kill him for what he had just done. And the Pharaoh did. In that moment, the Pharaoh, when he heard what happened, the Pharaoh wanted to kill him. So, to escape punishment and from being killed by Pharaoh, Moses ran away to Midian. He became a stranger in a strange land, separated from his home and his family. At this point, it took many years after this incident for Moses to be ready to serve God. So we're going to start where Moses escapes or leaves, I should say, runs away from Egypt. So we're in Exodus 2, and we're going to be verse 15 through 19. So just a little bit further down. It says, when Moses arrived in Midian, he sat down beside a well. Now the priests in Midian had 7 daughters who came as usual to draw water and fill the water for their father's flock. But some other shepherds came and chased them away. So Moses jumped up and rescued the girls from the shepherds. Then he drew water for their flocks. Mind you, this is already the second time Moses is saving people. He saved the slave, now he's saving the girls. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked. So the father's name is Reuel. His name is also Jethro. So later on in this, as we go through, you're going to hear the name Jethro. Reuel and Jethro are the same person. So when the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked, "Why are you back so soon today?" They responded, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds." They answered, "And then he drew water for us and watered our flocks." Before we continue and I break down that for just a moment, Moses was by himself, but yet he was able to get rid of multiple other shepherds that were trying to scare off the girls. How was he able to do that? We got to understand where Moses came from. As an Egyptian prince, Moses would have been trained well. He would have been trained, not just well, but he would have been trained with the military, which was the top military in the world at that time. It was the most advanced. So he had all the fighting experience. He had all the formal training. So even a large group of shepherds would have been no match for the fighting techniques of this trained warrior. But can you tell Moses was already a protector? He was already setting people free before God called him to do it. Think about our lives right now. Is there something that we find that we're good at? Maybe God's calling us to eventually have that be used for his glory. I want you to just sit on that for a little bit. Now, once he helped the sisters, Moses was invited back to the house of Reuel, which, as I mentioned, is also known. His name is also known as Jethro, where Jethro gave Moses one of his daughters, Zipporah, as his wife. That took many years, but that ended up happening. Eventually, they end up having a son. But this is where the story of Moses' test of obedience begins. So a lot of us know the story or may have heard of the story of the burning bush. But I want to give you the full lead up to what was going on, how that happened, and what took place during that time. So we're going to fast forward just a few more years or several more years. At this point, Moses is almost 80 years old, or he's around 80 years old. For years, God had been hearing the cries of the Israelites, and he had not forgotten about them. And the Pharaoh who wanted Moses dead had passed away himself. God was ready to use Moses, but the question was Moses ready to be used by God? Moses was no longer the prince of Egypt. He was a shepherd. Can you imagine that lifestyle change? You go from being a prince, having everything done for you, having servants of your own, you don't have to lift a finger for anything, to now being a shepherd and a nomad in a land that you don't even know. And to top that off, he was holding the very job he had been taught to despise. Take that in just for a minute and think about that. He was doing the job, living places that he was taught to despise because as a prince, you don't do those things. But now he is a nomad. He is a shepherd. He is living out in the wilderness, taking care of the flock. He is a shepherd amongst sheep. What a humbling experience this must have been for Moses. But God was preparing him for leadership. Living the life of a shepherd and a nomad, God was prepping him. He was getting him humble, getting him ready to serve him. One day, when Moses was tending to his flock, he was on Mount Sinai, which you are going to hear. This is called God's mountain. He saw a burning bush, but the branches were not burning. So just like any other person, Moses was curious, wanting to see what was going on. So he went closer to examine it. And when he did, the angel of God spoke to him. This part got me for just a second. So I want to make sure you are not confused here. It says angel of God. So, and that's in chapter 3, verse 3, when it says angel of God, it's actually referring to God himself. Further on in the scriptures, it will specify that it is God talking, but I wanted to make sure that there was no confusion. So I want to break this up here so you can understand. So we're going to be looking at Exodus 3, verse 4 through 6. That's where we're going to take off right now. So Exodus 3, 4 through 6. It says, when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush. Moses, Moses. I am here, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. I am going to stop here and dive into this for just a moment. First, why did God tell Moses to take off his sandals? No, it's not just so to see if he would obey him, which he did. But taking off his sandals was an act of reverence, conveying his own unworthiness before God. This is like any of us who want to pray and we're alone praying. This is like getting down on your knees. You're surrendering to him. So instead of taking off your sandals, you're getting on your knees because you are conveying your own unworthiness before God. Yes, God can be our friend, but ultimately, he is our sovereign Lord. So to approach him frivolously or with a lack of care shows a lack of respect and sincerity on our parts, which is why God was telling Moses to take off his sandals. Moses covered his face in that moment too and took off his sandals out of respect. Put yourself in Moses' sandals for a moment. You are in a field, mind your own business, with your sheep all around you. And all of a sudden, Yahweh, the great I am, calls you by name from a burning bush. How terrifying would that be? How exhilarating would that feel, though? How would you have reacted? You see a bush on fire, but the branches aren't burning, and yet it starts talking to you. Can you imagine what was going through Moses' head in that moment? Because mind you, they didn't have phones back then. So he's probably like, man, no one's going to believe this. He didn't have a way to live stream it. He didn't have a way to take pictures of it. He didn't have a way to take a video of it. So he's like, man, none of my friends are going to believe me. If you told your friends, they probably would think you'd gone insane. But Moses humbly listened to God. But he was still afraid and didn't feel that he was worthy, which is why it said he covered his face. God tells Moses he has heard the people's cries, and he is sending Moses back to the Pharaoh to get his people out of Egypt. Now, I don't know about you, but going back to a land that you escaped from so you wouldn't die already sounds scary enough. I'm sure, what you're going to find out here, Moses will question God. And there, I'm sure there's going to be multiple reasons why. Just like I'm sure you would have multiple questions about, God, why are you making me do this? So Moses in verse 11 through 12, because this is the first time Moses actually does protest to God after God tells him he's going to send him back to Egypt. But in verse 11, it says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. Moses questioned God not because he didn't believe God, but he questioned him because he questioned as to why. Why him? Who was he? And why would the people even listen to him? He felt inadequate himself. Mind you, it had been 40 years since he had been back to Egypt. I want you to understand this for a moment. How many times have you questioned if you are good enough or the right person for what God is having you do? Think of a time maybe where God called you to do something. Maybe it was going up on stage or getting on your knees in front of people, or maybe it was worshiping different. Maybe it was going over to the homeless person and helping them out. Maybe you're telling God you weren't ready. Maybe you told God that it's too big of a task for you to handle. Doesn't Moses' response sound like someone who is scared too? Not just scared of God, but to go back and face the people who didn't accept him. They didn't consider him one of them. Mind you, he was a prince. Back then, he was at least. And he no longer was royalty, so why would the Pharaoh listen to him? So once again, he would be an outsider. So in that moment, he didn't feel the people would believe him. So Moses protested for a second time. Verse 13 through 15, it says, but Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of our ancestors sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to be remembered for all generations. The first time Moses protested was because he felt inadequate. He didn't feel he was good enough. The second time, though, was a little bit different. Moses questioned God because he didn't feel that people would believe him. He wasn't questioning who God was. He knew who God was. So when he asked, what do I tell them who you are? I want to explain what he's trying to convey here. Imagine going up to a stranger and telling them something super important, life or death importance. But the person doesn't know who you are. Are they going to believe you? Are they going to trust you? Are they going to listen? That's what he was trying to convey in this moment. That's why Moses was protesting again. Have you ever had a boss or a teacher tell you to do something that sounded so crazy and so out of the box? But because you know that person and you trusted them, it made it easier to follow what they wanted you to do. Well, the people didn't know or trust Moses. So how much harder would it be for them to follow him? That's why Moses was questioning God in this moment. Moses was feeling the people wouldn't trust him. And because he didn't feel the people would listen to him, or because that he didn't feel the people would listen to him. So when you feel those thoughts, remember you are not alone. We all at times feel we're not good enough. We all feel we have the right to question God on something. I'm not ready. They're not going to believe me. It's not the right time. I want you to understand it's okay to question God, and it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not fully understand why God is making you go through something challenging. Because Moses was about to go through something incredibly challenging. This is what Moses was feeling too. But it's your actions that determine your obedience to God. But here's the thing. Moses continued to question God. So Moses protested for a third time. Moses may have been a trained fighter and can defend his family, but he was not a good public speaker. He told God that he gets tongue-tied and his words get tangled. So Moses didn't feel comfortable speaking on behalf of the people with such an important message to Pharaoh by himself. Moses did something that a lot of our kids do. He pleaded with God. But God reassured him. He wasn't going to be making him do this by himself. For one, he was going to be with him. And then further along, we find out that his brother Aaron will also be joining him. And God will be giving them the ability to do miracles. In Exodus 4:1, Moses questions God again and says, but Moses protested again. What if they don't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? Moses' reluctance and fear were caused by his own anticipation of what might happen. This is anxiety, you guys. This is what we deal with on a daily basis. What if this happens? What if that happens? God is asking him to put his trust in him in this moment. He was worried about how the people would respond, what they would do. How many times in our lives have we built up situations in our own heads before they even happened, which then caused anxiety to build up about what might go wrong? How many of us do that every single day? How many of us fight that same fight over and over just to get through that situation and it turn out just fine? God does not ask us to go where he has not provided the means for him to help. So go where he leads. Trusting him to supply courage, confidence, and the resources at the right moment. This is where God shows him how he's going to be with him for a moment. So in Exodus 4:2-7, I'm going to read this to you. I want you to pay attention to how God uses the things around him. Then God asked him, "What is in your hand?" Remind you, he's a shepherd. So what's going to be in his hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. "Throw it on the ground," the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. I don't know about y'all, but I'm terrified of snakes. If that thing would have turned into a snake after throwing a stick on the ground, I would have jumped back too. Then the Lord told him, "Reach out and grab the tail." I'm going to confess one thing right now. If God would have told me to reach down and grab the tail of the snake, I would have been terrified. I probably would have questioned God in that moment. Are you sure? Is it going to bite me? So Moses listened to God in this moment, though. So Moses reached out and grabbed it and turned it back, into a shepherd's staff in his hand. "Perform this sign," the Lord told him. Then they will believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors and the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, really has appeared to you. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now put your hand in your cloak." So Moses put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, his hand was as white as snow with a severe skin disease. I'm not sure what would have been more scary, the snake or the skin disease. Now God tells him, "Put your hand back in your cloak," the Lord said. So Moses put his hand back in. And when he took it out again, it was healthy as the rest of his body. Think about this. God could have used anything he wanted to show Moses how he would work through him. But what did he use? He uses things he was already holding. A shepherd's staff. He was a shepherd. He's using the resources that he had with him. God used it as a sign to teach him an important lesson. God sometimes takes joy in using ordinary things for extraordinary purposes. So think about this. What are the things that are in your life that God uses? For some of us, it's our voice to sing. Some of us, it's a pen to be able to write. Maybe to be able to write music, maybe to write notes, maybe to write poetry, write books. Maybe he gave you a mouth to be able to talk and speak publicly. And it's called having a gift of tongue. Not tongues, but being able to speak and have words pronunciate the right way, being able to convince people what you are saying. Growing up, well, for me, I never thought he would use the gifts that I have, that he gave me, to help bring people to him. He used what I already had. He gave me the gift to be able to write poetry. He gave me the gift for public speaking and for teaching. I always just enjoyed teaching and helping people grow and develop. I always enjoyed putting my thoughts onto paper. I never figured he was going to be using that to help lead other people to Christ. But that is exactly what he's doing in my life. So what are the things in your life that you're good at, that he's going to be using later on or now to do the work that he wants done through you. God tried to show Moses he will be able to do this because he would be with him throughout all of it. So, quick question. Can you remember a time when you didn't want to do something? Let me rephrase that. Can you remember a time when your parents told you to do something that you didn't want to do? So you made up an excuse as to why you shouldn't do it? What happened? Didn't your parents eventually get annoyed with you or upset with you and tell you to get it done? God is no different on that part. But when Moses ran out of excuses, Moses resorted to one final technique. And this is when God gets angry at Moses for questioning and denying what he wanted him to do. Mind you, he just shown him the power that he's going to be able to have. And Moses still questions God in this moment. Exodus 4:13 through 14. It says, but Moses again pleaded. Remember I said, now he's not just complaining. He's not questioning. He's now begging and pleading. Lord, please send someone else. Then the Lord became angry with Moses. All right, he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks well. And look, he is on his way to meet you now. He'll be delighted to see you. Now, mind you, before I even jump into that, God wasn't sending Aaron in his place. God was having Aaron join Moses. So Moses was still called to do it. But now Aaron's been volunteered to help. So when Moses ran out of excuses, he began to beg and plead. Parents, doesn't that sound like our kids at times? They'll make every excuse they can as to why they shouldn't do something. And once that doesn't work and they don't get what they want, don't they beg and plead? This interaction with Moses and God remind me of the times with my own kids. I can tell them to do something, and it's excuse after excuse as to why it shouldn't get done, why they shouldn't do it. I'm not the one who made the mess. It's not my cup. It's not fair. I don't know why it's like that, but it's not my fault. Then after all their excuses, they beg, please, I don't want to do it. Please don't make me. And I can tell you for one of my kids in particular, it could just be about getting him out of his comfort zone and making him try something new. But the results is this type of interaction. How many times has God called you to step out of your own comfort zones, to do something that you don't feel ready for? That's what God is calling Moses to do right now. He's not comfortable being a public speaker. He's not comfortable going in front of the people. But what is God doing? He's providing a resource to Moses to help him. Just like God said he would be with him, he is now also being with him through his brother. How many times have you let fear get in the way of doing what God wants you to do? How many times did you not walk in obedience and decide not to obey God? Think about that for a minute. How many times? Are you still questioning God in this moment? Is there something he is telling you, I want you to go do this for me? I want you to go help that person. I want you to get up on that stage. I want you to write this down. I want you to go speak to this person that is standing over there. But yet, you let your fear sink in. You let the anxiety build up, and you don't listen. That's exactly what Moses was going through, also. But after this little interaction, God saw Moses was ready. Even though Moses questioned him repeatedly, Moses trusted God and obeyed him in the end. So God sends Moses and Aaron to speak to the Pharaoh. In Exodus 4:21, it says, "And the Lord told Moses, when you arrive back in Egypt, go to the Pharaoh and perform all the miracles I've empowered you to do. But I will harden his heart, so he will refuse to let the people go." Can you imagine already questioning God, already now being like, okay, I will do it. You provide the help. And now knowing you're about to walk into the lion's den, knowing that the Pharaoh's heart is going to be hardened already, let that sink in. He's going to be there knowing that he can perform miracles, but the Pharaoh will not care because God's already going to be hardening his heart. I know for anyone who has anxiety, if you were in Moses' shoes in this moment and God tells you, I'm going to harden his heart, your heart would be pounding out of your chest. You're already in a stressful situation. Moses already had a hard time speaking publicly. The people don't consider him one of their own. And the previous Pharaoh wanted him dead. So all these things start piling up. Now you throw in that the Pharaoh's heart is going to be hardened also. I can imagine Moses in this moment looking to God and be like, thanks, God. Want to add anything else to my plate in this moment? How many times have we been there in our own lives? How many times have we looked up at God and said, thanks. Can this get any worse? What else do you want to put on my plate? When everything feels like it's caving in on us and the situation just keeps getting worse, it's not always that God has walked away from you. But this is what Moses was feeling in this moment. But through the fear, through the anxiety, through feeling inadequate, Moses obeyed God. Moses put his faith and his trust into God. And God made sure Moses wasn't alone. Not only was God with him in ways Moses didn't even know, like fully what was going to happen. God told him some miracles were going to happen, but he hasn't explained everything that's about to happen. But he did also let him know his brother is going to be there. So God's given him a little bit of hope and a little bit of comfort, knowing, hey, you're going to be able to perform miracles, and I got you someone to take away some of your anxiety because your brother's there. I want you to catch one thing for just a moment, though. Moses volunteered his own brother to help him without his brother's knowledge. Doesn't that sound like such a brotherly thing to do? Oh, I'm going to have my brother help me. They have no clue what's going on. And all of a sudden you walk over to him like, hey, this is what we're doing. If you have a brother, I'm sure you can relate, especially if your older brother comes to the younger brother and is like, hey, sorry, you're coming with me. This is what we're doing. And that's exactly what happened. Moses is 3 years older than Aaron. Actually, yeah. 80 and 83 years old at this point. So let's talk about this for a second. In Exodus 4:27 through 28, now the Lord said to Aaron, go out into the wilderness to meet Moses. So Aaron went and met Moses at the mountain of God, which is Mount Sinai, as we talked about, and he embraced him. Moses then told Aaron everything the Lord had commanded him to say. And he told him about the miraculous signs the Lord had commanded him to perform. Doesn't sound like Aaron put up as much of a fight as Moses did, though. In the end, Moses and Aaron went to talk to the Pharaoh. Next week, we will dive into what happens when Moses and Aaron finally get to talk to the Pharaoh. But I want us to think back about all the times Moses questioned God. He made excuses and pleaded with God. But Moses, in that time still, did not stop being scared. Moses did not fully understand everything God was going to do. Moses did not all of a sudden just agree that he was the right person for this task. None of us just stopped being scared out of the blue. We don't always have all the answers up front from God. God is calling Moses to conquer his fear with his faith in him. Even though Moses didn't fully understand what will happen on this journey, even though you may not know the outcome of stepping out of your comfort zone, God isn't asking you to understand, but he is asking you to obey. You may not agree with what God is wanting you to do. You may not think you are the right person for that task. But it's not our plan. It's God's plan. So it's okay to cry out to God. It's okay to beg to him. And it's okay to feel scared. Just remember, God is also our Father. And he can become annoyed when his kids question him and make excuses as to why they won't obey. So ultimately, obeying God needs to be the final outcome. What are things in your life right now that you might be arguing with God about? What are things that you feel he is calling you to do, but you feel inadequate? Just remember that he can use any part of your life to do extraordinary things. It's up to you on whether you let him do those things and you obey him. If you don't obey, you're never going to see the miraculous things he can do through you. So this week, I challenge you to take a step out of your comfort zone. If God is calling you to do something, to help someone, to speak up, or to volunteer to do something that you normally don't do, or you feel that it's on your heart, God saying, help this person in front of you, go step up on stage and sing. Volunteer through the church for this or for that. I challenge you to do it. Even if you feel you don't think you can, or if you are embarrassed, or if you're uncomfortable, just do it. Take that step in obedience. Just remember, God can use you to do extraordinary things for him. But you must first obey him. So who's ready to take that step in obedience today? Let's live this week in obedience, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable. That is my challenge for you this week. So next week, we'll pick up right where we left off. We're going to be finally getting to talk. Moses and Aaron's going to be able to talk to the Pharaoh. So I leave you right here. Let's finish up in prayer, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you, Father, for everything you do for us. Thank you for challenging us. Thank you for using us in ways we never thought we could be used for you, Father. I pray that you allow all of us to listen to you and obey the calling that you have on our lives. This way we can help your kingdom grow, Father, so that we can help others who may be in need. So that we can praise you in ways that we were scared to praise you in, Father. Whether that's us getting on our knees and praising you in front of people, whether that's us raising our hands at church, whether that is stepping out and volunteering to do something that we never would have done. I pray, Lord, that you take away the fear and the anxiety so that we can do these things. I pray that you give us the courage and make us courageous for this week, Lord. Help us step out of our own comfort zone to be able to live for you, Father. I pray this in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week's going to be a really fun lesson. I will talk to you soon.